welcome to our talk. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Deidre Moss, and I'm the host of Can We Talk with Deidre Moss. I'm an educator, motivator, and a talk connoisseur. Today, I am joined with one of my favorite people, Dr. Michelle Wallace-Rencher, who will help us to dissect our topic today. We're going to have an open session tonight. And so she is joining me today. So at this time, I want to pass the virtual mic to our guest so that she can introduce herself.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome. And as you said, my introduction is all on me. I am Dr. Michelle Rencher. My maiden name is Wallace, but my first name is Michelle. My middle name is Simone because I am named after the legendary truth teller, Nina Simone. My father was the late Michael Wallace, and hence I am Michelle. I honor my husband by my last name, Rencher. And I always bring along my Wallace family in Nassau, Bahamas. And behind me, you can see the aerial view of what it looks like if you were over the Bahamas. Today, I am so excited to be with you tonight. As you said, we're going to have an open discussion about all kind of things. So I'm here for the conversation. So thank you for the invitation, and we're going to have a good time.
Definitely. And thank you for accepting the invitation. I appreciate you. But before we begin, if you're tuning in, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. Before we begin, if you're tuning in from our social media page and you just joined us, like and share this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel using the links on our page. We need your support to continue these talks. Also, if you think there's something that we should be talking about, feel free to let us know. We do want to hear from you. Let us know if you would like to advertise on our platform or sponsor our program. And with that, let's get into our talk. And so I know that you briefly introduced yourself and you said that your first name represents your father in some way, and the last name you bring honor to to your husband. But I don't know if you want to briefly just give us a little, just a brief introduction of yourself.
Absolutely, I can do that. So currently, again, I am a native Bahamian, born and raised in Nassau, Bahamas, but I live in the Bahamian diaspora. Diaspora meaning anywhere else except Nassau, Bahamas, or throughout the 700 islands of the Bahamas. I reside in Middle Tennessee, where I am the strategic technology change manager for the entire state of Tennessee. I'm also an academic mentor because as a lifelong learner, I recognize how important it is for students to have access to higher education. And when you have students in those spaces, every now and then it's important to have a friendly voice, a smiling face to encourage those students through the conversation, making certain that they are successful in their journeys, as I was given that opportunity. And so, in my doctorate journey, I'm grateful to have studied the experience of Bahamian civil servant leaders, making certain that they were a part of the conversation when it comes to the Bahamian problem of the Bahamian brain drain. And on that journey, I learned so much, not only about the academic journey, but also about myself. And it's important that we keep the conversations going so that we can continue being not only lifelong learners individually, but collectively.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for
Absolutely.
sharing. And I appreciate you giving back. You shared that you're a mentor, so not only have you earned your accomplishment, but you also look back to those behind you. And so thank you for being a mentor and
I
and
think
and
that's
sharing.
so important because
Mhm.
oftentimes we like to believe that we are doing whatever we have done by ourselves, but it is never individually.
Mhm.
Whether it's our parents, our wider community, our neighbors, our lecturers and teachers, community members, there's always somebody who has helped you get where you are today. And so it is only right that you find an opportunity to support somebody else because you just never know where they are going to go. And you never know when you yourself may need that extra helping hand along the way. And so as an academic mentor, it is my honor and privilege to make certain that other students globally find their space and recognize that sometimes academic institutions are not always the easiest place to be. But it can be that much easier. It can be made that much more doable if you have somebody to support your journey. And I'm here to help anybody who needs that kind of support to make certain that if I can do this, then so too, then so can they do whatever their this is.
Definitely. And as you would have mentioned, the support is definitely needed.
Hmm.
Um, it's definitely not easy. I just want to mention Vivian. Hi, Vivian. She's saying hi, Deidre and guests. Great to see you. Happy New Year. Hi, Vivian. Thank you so much for joining us. Miss Vivian is from Jamaica, and we appreciate you every time you join us. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
So
I hope you
Caribbean people
enjoyed.
all around the world, right? Caribbean in the house. but it's
Absolutely,
but
absolutely.
as she said, Happy New Year. We started talking and didn't even say Happy New Year. It seems almost
Yeah,
appropriate in the month of January to still say it, but this is the first time that I've seen you since last year.
absolutely,
So
absolutely,
likewise,
and
Happy New Year and Happy Black
absolutely.
History Month.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy New Year. And we talked about that. We talk about those New Year's resolution and persons, in the new year. I mean, we're in February right now, but we're still pretty new in the year. And January really is a time when people really sit back and say,
Yes.
think about what it is that they want to accomplish and their goals
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Like, these vision boards and all these things going on. And maybe by February, maybe those things vanish. I don't know. I don't know.
Kind of
Yeah.
trailing off a little bit. No, but I
But
I'm not really one for New Year's resolutions per
yeah.
se. But I do tend to look at the new year as an opportunity to figure out what are some things that I can do, not so much as a resolution or to make to resolve, but more to say, what can I do differently? What can I do that's new? And
Hmm.
for me, I have done a few new things here or there that I hope to sustain throughout the year. But the one thing that I have done is say that to myself, I want to experience more in
Mm.
2024. Not that I want it to rhyme like Dr. Seuss, but I
Hey.
definitely want to experience more experiences like this kind of conversation. I want to
Yeah.
experience more opportunities to support other people and to
Hmm.
make certain that they are getting more of my energy and my time.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. More in 2024
More,
and
more.
more in 2024. And like you would have mentioned, I kind of moved away from those resolutions as well because you find that it's kind of difficult to maintain. So I don't want to build up those expectations and not be able to live up to
Yeah.
those. So I'm kind of in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
And so, going back to the fact that tonight is an open session night,
Hmm.
and so we talk about this being the month of February, and this is such an important month for those of our hue, and this being Black History Month, and how the connection, the Caribbean connection. We talk about the Caribbean being in the house with us tonight. Miss Pitta
Yeah.
from Jamaica, us being Bahamians. What is the Caribbean connection to Black History Month? What is our role? You know?
Well, first of all, there's so many connections. It's not one thing. First of all, I think because of our geographic proximity alone, the amount of inches on the map from the Bahamas obviously being a chain of islands. So if we were one single landmass like Jamaica or Cuba or other countries in the Caribbean, then it would probably be a little bit more easier to understand. But because we are a chain of islands, the most northern tip of the Bahamas, being Bimini, is just inches away from the Florida coast. Obviously, the more southern islands of the Bahamas in Nagua and the Mayaguana Keys, they are more southern away, and so therefore it's not as noticeable. But those of us who are born in the central Bahamas, who were born in Nassau, Bahamas, those of us who have family members in Grand Bahama and Bimini and even in the Abacos, they are accustomed to going to South Florida and Northern Florida on a regular daily trip because of the proximity. And so, as a result of that proximity, it has given us a very almost symbiotic relationship with the mainland of the US. There are many studies currently in the University of Miami, in fact, has taken a lot of leverage to examine the role of Bahamians in the Florida experience. If you remember, back in the 1940s and 50s, before there was Roe versus Wade and the Board of, or sorry, Brown versus the Board of Education, which was when Thurgood Marshall, the late Thurgood Marshall, who was on the Supreme Court, he fought that battle for equality in education in the school system. And the phenomenal fight that he fought was based on the Brown versus the Board of Education, which talked about the equality of schools. But long before that fight happened, there was inequality in schools, meaning that African American students did not have the access to the same level of quality education in the early 1900s. But what is interesting about that is that Bahamian students who are our ancestors, our great grandparents, our grandparents, and many ancestors before, because they were born in a colonized Bahamas. The then King of England granted his subjects, the British subjects, because of course at that time the Bahamas was not yet an independent nation. And so under the system of colonization, they were granted access to a certain level of education. We couldn't necessarily call it quality education by today's standards, but it was access to all age schools. Similar to that TV show Little House on the Prairie, everybody from from kindergarten to about maybe fifth or sixth grade, probably in the same classroom, but nonetheless, it was more than the average African American would have had in the early 1900s. And as such, when the US governments came in and said, we are in need of arms and legs, we need persons, we need personnel, we need talent to come and build South Florida. There were many Northerners who were interested in living in Florida because of the climate. But Florida at that point in time was not as built up as it is now. There was no I-95 corridor. There were no bridges. There wasn't any of the infrastructure. And they needed arms and legs to build. But with those arms and legs to build also required a certain level of academic prowess, which means reading, writing, arithmetic, and as we would say in our common vernacular, the ability to figure, just to know how to figure things out. But that requires you to have a certain level of education that most African Americans at that time did not have access to. And so Bahamians were encouraged to migrate. So many of our ancestors migrated. Some of them came back to the Bahamas, but some of them made the trips back and forth, as we would say, backwards and forwards. And so they made those trips backwards and forwards, and they took with them their Bahamian culture. And so if you go anywhere from Coconut Grove in Miami all the way up as far as Jacksonville in the north, you will find pockets of Bahamian communities that look just like communities in the Bahamas today. So the architecture, the food, in the restaurant services, obviously, there's the plant life and the flora and the fauna, yes, because it's very close to the Bahamas. But you can find Bahamian foods from, like I said, Coconut Grove in the south all the way up to Jacksonville. You can find the Bahamian presence, and most importantly, James Weldon Johnson. Lift Every Voice and Sing is the Negro spiritual that people sing typically in the month of February, but you typically hear it within the African American church. Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's the song that people sing with pride, but I am always proud to let African Americans know that he is of Bahamian soil. He is Bahamian.
Absolutely.
His
Yes,
mommy
he is my
Bahamian, so therefore he
brother.
Bahamian.
That's right. That's my Bohemian brother. And you talked a little bit about, I don't know if you were flowing into the contract situation. And
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes,
so the
that's exactly it. So, but it began before the contract. The reason why
mm,
they were able to be under contract was because the U.S. government recognized how much they could do. Because nobody goes and gives you a contract and they say know what you
yeah.
could do.
Hmm.
You've been tried and tested.
Absolutely.
So, but Bahamians have been traveling to South Florida and throughout the Florida coast and all the way up as far as Georgia,
Absolutely.
as the 1800s.
Hmm.
So when you think about the Emancipation Proclamation, Bahamians were liberated before African Americans were liberated. And
Hmm.
so there's a very interesting dynamic where many African American slaves, persons who were enslaved in the era of enslavement, they would be traveling to the Bahamas and residing in the communities of Gambia and Adelaide, residing in Fox Hill. Typical communities where we know there's a lot of enslavement heritage. The heritage of the enslaved populace still exists. Jumbe
Mhm.
Village and all those communities in Nassau, especially certain parts of
Mhm.
the other islands also, but especially in Nassau, the capital is where a lot of persons came from Florida and sort of hid out because they realized they learned that there was freedom. But now we can say today it wasn't true freedom; it was more liberation than it was freedom. But
Mhm.
liberation back then is better than nothing. And so they were able to stow
Absolutely.
away. They were able to
Absolutely.
stow away and build quality lives for themselves, continue on with their cultural experiences, and in essence have the kind of life that they really wanted to have for themselves. They were able to worship, they were able to build communities, they were able to share their cultural identities and then build upon the culture. So I think it's so important to recognize that yes, because of our proximity, we have a very symbiotic relationship and one that really and truly is going to pass the sands of time. It's going to last forever.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the history is there, the connection is there. I
Yes,
think it'll be
yes.
very easy to find that in some families, you may have a relative that is living within that area, within that district, within
Mm.
some part of the U.S. So
I
the
think we
connection
all
is
do. I think we
there.
all
Hmm.
have those connections. And even if you don't have a person that you can say a named person, a named ancestor, I think what you can find is a sense of commonality. When you walk into certain communities, you automatically feel a sense of okay, I've been here before. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, and typically we think of it obviously in South Florida, but I know the first time I went to Jacksonville, there are communities in Jacksonville heading towards Jacksonville Beach. It looked just like Pinewood Gardens. Like
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
think you in Pinewood.
Yes, thank you home. Absolutely.
Home, home, home.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
you could even see probably even like see one John Shea around the corner.
Absolutely. Yes. Mom and pop store. Hmm.
Yes, yes, yes.
Absolutely. And so the connection is there. And we definitely can agree that, and history has shown us that the connection is there. And so we are happy to celebrate our role in this month, in the month of February, for Black History Month, and
Yes.
many persons
When
from the Caribbean in general who would have who would have contributed,
absolutely.
to our
And
progress.
not just obviously building the infrastructure. You got to think that movement, if you think about it,
Yes.
movement of people is
Hmm.
indicative of being Caribbean. If you
Yeah.
think anything about the Caribbean world, just the way that we speak
Hmm.
is a very lyrical way. Our word choice, our selection of words, yes. But if you
Yeah.
think about Caribbean music and our food, the way we worship, all of that is
Hmm.
indicative of movement of people. And so when
Hmm.
you think about of the triangular slave trade, the merging of European, West and East African, the Asian influence, the Spanish
Hmm.
influence, all of those cultural identities merging together in one community
Hmm.
has created in essence a global movement. So anytime you hear a certain kind of music, it is a Caribbean flavor or Caribbean flair. The way that we even
Hmm.
walk into a room, whether it is virtually or in person, only we walk with a certain kind of je ne sais quoi. That's something that only we
Absolutely.
do. That's something that only
Exactly.
we do. And I
Absolutely.
think it's
Mhm.
important to own that because even for instance, if you think about the uh, in popular culture right now, if you go and you
Mhm.
Google whatever is popular music right now, so Megan the Stallion is from Houston, Texas,
Mhm.
but Megan the Stallion is battling with an island girl, Nicki Minaj.
Mhm.
If you think about
Absolutely.
if you are into the cosmetics world,
Mhm.
nobody is gonna battle Fenty, which is
Mhm.
Rihanna, the Caribbean's own.
Mhm.
Whenever Beyonce puts her finger on the pulse of the universe, the world stops for just slight moment, and we all know where noses come from noses, Long Island. I don't
Mhm.
care that she say Louisiana and Alabama. We all know it's noses, Long Island. And so there's the way that we put our spin on those things. The fact that when you think about people train sometimes 4, 6, and 8 years to catch the fastest arms and legs on the planet.
Oh.
And the races last for minutes.
Ooh.
People have been training for 6 and 8 years to catch
Yeah.
the fastest arms and legs on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
People who did not medal in the last Olympics been training for 4 years for the last Olympics, and they still didn't make the last one. What's the young lady named Shikari?
Mm-hmm.
Bless her heart.
Shikari Richardson.
But she been training for 8 years to catch
Mm.
two Jamaican women. Well, two
Wow.
Jamaicans and one Bahamian.
Shawnee.
Shawnee
Shawnee.
Miller Weebo,
Mm-hmm.
Shawnee Miller Weebo, and the two Jamaican young ladies. She been
Mm-hmm.
training for 8 years to catch them. So at the end of the day, whether we recognize our prowess in the entertainment sector, in the halls of any industry, at the end of the day, it cannot be um, underwhelmed. We cannot be
Mm-hmm.
dampened by any measure that this is our season to let the world know we don't just entertain.
Absolutely.
We don't
And
just entertain.
absolutely. And when I think of us, when I think of the Bahamas being so tiny, and the impact that Bahamians have on the
Yes.
world is
Hmm.
crazy to me. When you think of Sidney Poitier being
Yes.
the
Yes.
first Black actor to win an Oscar, a Bahamian from Cat Island, it's crazy. When you think of
This
our
big.
impact, we're so small.
This big.
Shawnee Miller Weibo,
We will.
the four by 100 queen
The
is
fastest
crazy.
arms and legs on the
Even
planet
Gardner, the 4 by 100 king,
from
we're
Africa.
so small. So we talk about Jamaica, yeah. Hey Vivian, hi from Jamaica, but we are a dot. We are tiny
We
compared
are a
to
dot. We are a
yeah.
dot. And when you think about just not just again, not just in the sports realm, not just in music and
Oh,
arts and the
absolutely.
entertainment, but just
Education,
in terms
academics.
of our academic prowess, the fact that we even dare to walk into certain spaces and certain places and flex our intellectual prowess speaks highly of the fact that we come from a small dot on the island on the map,
Mhm.
absolutely. But trust and believe it is not small by any measure because we have brain power, we have
Oh yeah.
intellectual savvy, we are innovative, we are creative, we
And
have some of the most.
when you say creative, sorry to interrupt you. I think
Yes,
about
yes,
Theodore. I hope I get his name right. Theodore Seeley, who has designed the John
yes.
Canoe layout for Minnie and Mickey, the John Canoe for Disney. And then I think about Javon, who is a Rhodes Scholar. He is a
Yes.
Bahamian. It's
Well,
crazy.
first of all, let me correct you because he is the fourth Bahamian Rhodes Scholar. The fourth, if I can say it, four. As we say in Junkanoo, it ain't a repeat or a three-peat. It's a four-peat.
Yeah.
Only Bahamians could come up with a word that Webster has yet to understand. But for the Bahamas to have four Rhodes
Yeah.
Scholars,
Yeah.
four,
Hmm.
that's incredible. It speaks to our incredible ability and really capacity, the capacity
Hmm.
that we have to imagine more,
Yeah.
to imagine more for ourselves, to not
Hmm.
shrink behind the fact that we are small.
Hmm.
Because as you say, most people think of when they think of Sir Sidney, they have no concept of Cat Island. They have no
Hmm.
concept. They have no understanding of what Cat Island was like. If you ever read his book, he spoke
Hmm.
about the first time he sailed from Cat Island into Nassau Harbor and he
Hmm.
saw the lights and the distance and he couldn't
Hmm.
conceive of what it was. And you can see behind me the open water. So when you go from Cat
Wow.
Island in the south and you sail into Nassau Harbor, back then it was only one
Hmm.
bridge. He had no way of knowing they would have put another bridge up in his name.
Mm, wow.
He would have never known they're gonna
Mm,
erect a bridge in my name. Like,
wow.
how does one conceive of that if you were born and raised in a household that had no electricity,
Mm,
no indoor plumbing, where your parents were tomato farmers? So
wow.
clearly vitamin D deficiency was not something that he struggled with because he was
Mhm.
outside most of the day. Vitamin D was his that was his best friend, right? But
Mm-hmm.
to live and come but to come from very humble beginnings.
Humble beginnings. Mm-hmm.
Humble beginnings, absolutely. But there was
Mm-hmm.
something on the inside that said,
Yeah.
I am going to do something that nobody I know has ever even thought of.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody I know has ever even not to say that they didn't have the capacity. They didn't
Yeah.
even think of it.
Yeah.
Wasn't even and so the first time his parents had gone to a movie theater in life, that wasn't something that they didn't go to the Capitol Theater on Market Street. That's where the Capitol Theater, like right now, that building is Purity Bakery. It's just
Mm-hmm.
down from where I think the Saxons or one family practice in the old
Mm-hmm.
City Meat Market, just down the street,
Yeah.
next
In
door
the
to
back
where
of Mason edition.
Mason's Edition,
Yeah.
exactly. That is now, that's where, that was, at one point, that was the Capitol Theater. I'm dating
Mm.
myself because my grandmother used to be a concession stand lady at the Capitol Theater. I
Wow.
have never been there. I went to the
Wow.
movies at the Shirley Theater on Shirley Street. But back
Mm.
in the day, the Capitol Theater was the theater for Bahamians of African descent.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
where, because everything in the Bahamas back then was segregated. It was a
Mm-hmm.
segregated country. And so that's where his parents would have seen the first time he was on. Could you imagine seeing your first movie and your
Wow.
child is in the movie? And your child is the star? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Mm-hmm.
How does one conceive
Yep.
of that thought? How does one process what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that feel like in your heart? But what I could tell you, what it must have felt like, is probably the same thing that most of our parents felt when they saw us cross a
Mm.
stage the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it
Mm-hmm.
was your elementary school
Yep.
speech day and prize giving, whether it was your
Yeah.
high school graduation, your undergraduate graduation, your master's graduation, or even, dare I say, your doctoral hooding
Hey.
ceremony. Imagine
Hey.
what your parents must feel when they see that. That's what I imagine
Absolutely.
his parents must have felt, because when you are a parent, whether you have a niece or a nephew, a neighborhood child, you see that child as an infant, and you see them growing up, and they mature and they grow up and they get taller, and they start thinking and talking in different ways that you've never even imagined. At
Yeah.
some point, there are limitations to what you can conceive of them doing.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, Bahamians have an interesting way of approaching life. I
Definitely.
don't think Bahamians operate in limits. I
Absolutely
don't
not.
know that we operate in limits. I don't know that we can see, but I can only go but so far. Or right here, that's
Yeah.
this me, right?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, not
Yeah.
really.
It's amazing. And to go back to Sydney and what he probably would have endured in his career being in, during those times with segregation. We talk about segregation. And then I did watch a documentary speaking about the fact that he would accept certain roles. He wouldn't
Yeah.
accept demeaning roles. So even the roles that he took on, they were strategic. They were, he was cognizant of what he was doing, and so he,
Of how he would be perceived, because at the end of the
yeah.
day, I think one of my favorite authors is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's a
Mm,
Nigerian author, and she's the author of Americana and Half of the Yellow Sun. And
mm,
what she says is that when you come from a predominantly African or predominantly Black country,
mm,
your perception of who you are is so
mm,
different that we have differences in the Bahamas. I don't mean to perceive or give the perception that
mm,
that we're free from isms, because we're not. I
mm.
mean,
Yeah, well, we definitely have our isms. I
we
don't want
have
to
our
talk about
share,
Sydney
right?
overnight. We
But I
do.
think people unless you've been there for an extended period of time and you've been immersed in the culture, you really don't understand what our isms look like. So
Mm,
it's not so much racism in the traditional sense that it is in the US or in the European countries. It's not
mm,
the typical ageism or even sexism, or those isms are different. They have a different
mm.
slant, a different, they're just, it's just different. But
Yeah.
what she talked about is saying how dangerous it is when people have a certain perspective of who we are, who come
Mm,
from predominant countries. We are a part
mm,
of the dominant culture.
Mhm.
So when you come from the dominant culture, you never see yourself in the light as being an underclassman. You don't
Mm.
see yourself as
It's
being
powerful.
less than. You don't.
Mhm.
You
Mhm. That's
and it
powerful.
has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with your sense of self. You have no concept of I am less than, and therefore I should be a shrinking violet. I must step back into the conversation. It never crossed your mind because you're like, well, I was born in the dawn of majority rule. Sidney Poitier was born in the era of my grandmother's. In fact, my grandmother and Sidney Poitier are cousins. My grandmother is Ruth Louise Poitier Clark, and so she was a Poitier from birth. They are first
Mm.
cousins. So
Wow.
they are from the era of colonialism where life was very different. I will say that.
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
born in the era of majority rule. I believe
Mhm.
you were born in an independent country.
Mhm.
So your concept of what it means to be a black woman is way
Mhm.
different than would
Yeah.
be of my mother and my
Mhm.
grandmother and even of
Mhm.
your mother because we're
Mhm.
just born in different times. But I was born in a time when the Bahamas was majority ruled.
Mhm.
Sir Lyndon Pinling was not yet Sir Lyndon. He was the premier, but he hadn't yet been knighted. He was the
Mhm.
premier. And Sir Milo Butler was still Milo Boatron Butler. He wasn't yet Sir Milo. There was
Mhm.
no the Milo Butler booklets for school. Those hadn't come out yet.
Mhm.
Those books hadn't come out yet. But I had teachers in school who grew up in a colonized Bahamas,
Mhm.
and they made it so that students like myself were able to understand the cost and the
Mhm.
price of liberation.
Mhm.
And that you were to conduct yourself in a certain way, you were to speak a certain way, you were to study a certain way because life was for you was going to be different. And here's how
Mhm.
you prepare for that life. And I believe
Mhm.
that a lot of Bahamian teachers, educators like yourself, um,
Mhm.
whether it's secondary, elementary, secondary, or even tertiary level educators, I believe each
Mhm.
of you have committed to creating spaces and places for
Mhm.
your students to be global citizens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is one of the themes for our institution. We're preparing our students for life in a global society, and this is how we live. But I want us to switch over. I want us to switch
Yeah,
topic because we're having
yeah.
open session tonight.
Let's go.
Um, I know we didn't want to get too political,
I
but
know.
you talked about isms, and I wanna touch a little bit on an ism that I
Mhm.
noticed.
Yeah.
I think you may be aware that recently we had a travel advisory. Um, yeah, we had a travel advisory, and so I'm seeing pockets of responses. So there are some responses that I'm seeing that this is a national problem. Why don't they just say that this is Nassau? This is not the entire Bahamas. So you now have persons from the family. Yeah. So, eh.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting discussion. I think it's unfortunate, first off.
Mm-hmm.
I think any loss of life, any loss of human life, diminishes our capacity for all of us to thrive,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, at the end of the day, whether the person was out on bail, whether the person was an innocent bystander, whether the person had committed a crime and was just awaiting sentencing, whatever way their life has been impacted when it comes to the system of justice, at the end of the day, any loss of life is tragic to our culture, to our community, any loss of
Mm-hmm.
life. And I think when you have travel advisories, I get it, but I think it's also my first question. I have family and friends who work in the tourism sector.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were, well, why is this happening? It's not Nassau. It's only Nassau. It's only residential Nassau. It's not the tourist district. I've heard all each of those comments. But my
Mm-hmm.
first question was, do we have a U.S. ambassador?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because in my mind, I remember the era when Sydney, it's not Sydney Wallace. No, it's not
Mm-hmm.
Sydney Wallace. Maxine Waters, Representative Maxine Waters' husband.
Mhm.
Sydney, I can't think of what his name is right now, but
Mhm.
he was a former ambassador to the Bahamas.
Mhm.
Leslie Avant, I believe her name was
Yeah.
also under the Obama administration, was also
Mhm.
a
Possible.
U.S. ambassador to the Bahamas. There are
Mhm.
so many other former ambassadors to the Bahamas.
Mhm.
When you have the kind of relationship that we have had for generations, not just decades, but for
Mhm.
generations that have spanned
Mhm.
hundreds of years to the U.S. economy, to the U.S. administrations, one would think that if there is a problem in your back door, that I can pick up the telephone and say what's happening before I would go ahead and send out a travel advisory. I want to understand. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, if there is nobody sitting in that seat
Mhm.
to make that phone call, one would
Mhm.
say maybe, just maybe, we have maybe lost some favor. Perhaps we've lost favor. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I know if it were me, I would pick up the telephone and just say, listen, Chief of Police or Minister Wayne Monroe, help me to understand exactly what is happening. Are tourists who are U.S. nationals, other foreign nationals, are they safe in this environment? What should not do? Help me to understand.
Mhm.
Bear in mind, I was traveling during the era of 9/11, living
Mhm.
in the diaspora for over 20 plus years. It is
Mhm.
easy to remember certain kinds of travel advisories and what they typically mean. I have
Mhm.
traveled to Europe. I was living in the US during the era of 9/11, before 9/11, and on 9/11, I was planning to travel for business. And
Mhm.
I remember that travel advisory. I remember how it felt. It makes
Mhm.
you wonder and feel like, oh, clutch your pearls.
Yeah.
It's not a safe environment for me. So
Mhm.
I think it's a precautionary tale,
Mhm.
but I think we, especially when we are so dependent on the
Yeah.
tourism product, that we
Mhm.
owe it to ourselves to make certain that we are, as we would say back in the day, clean, green, and pristine.
Absolutely.
Get your house in
And
order. Get your house in order.
absolutely. Absolutely. And like you would have mentioned, for such an important role, why are we
Sustainability. If that is your bread and butter,
absolutely?
your sidewalks must be clean. Your windows must be washed. Your product must be
Mhm.
clean, green, and pristine. And if we are to
Absolutely.
be the continue to be the jewel of the Caribbean when it comes to the tourism product, then I believe we need to do a better job of making certain that everybody recognizes how much how important it is to our sustainability. One would have thought that since we are just 2.5, maybe not quite 3 years away from the pandemic, when everything was shut down,
Mm.
if you remember, everything was shut down in 2020, right? There were no hotels,
Yeah.
there were no guests at
Everything was
Balmoral and
shut down.
Atlantis.
Everything
Everything
was
was
shut
shut
down.
down. And so if
Absolutely.
so how soon we have forgotten. How
Mhm.
soon we've forgotten what it was like.
But I'm trying to figure out, as you would have mentioned, that that thought came across my head as well. Why are we lacking an ambassador? I mean,
I don't know.
for a long time, we've always had a good relationship. We've always had an ambassador. I
Absolutely.
remember Ambassador Blankenship, I think, with
Yes.
the Bush
Mhm.
administration. We've always had ambassadors. So,
So perhaps it's coming back. Perhaps he or she has yet to be um, announced. But
mhm,
one would think since 2020 and 2021, everything opened back up, that
yeah.
somebody should have come. I do understand that the ambassadors, the new building is still under construction, is yet to be completely opened.
Mhm,
Perhaps they're waiting for that, but you shouldn't require a building to
right.
be resident. I don't
Mhm,
understand the politics behind it, but I just know we have for decades and generations had a very great, a very hospitable relationship. And I would hate to think that that relationship has faltered so much so that we are relying on um, a press statement to get our voices out. That's not like us. We don't shrink behind a no. We're not wallflowers. If anything, we
mhm.
bold and bright.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
I'm curious to see how it's going to unfold in the coming weeks and months. But I only hope that the world recognizes that um, several incidents, yes, are concerning, but it by no means shapes the the color and shape and the candor with which one can enjoy oneself when you travel to the Bahamas, whether it's on vacation or for business.
Absolutely. But I want to get to the ism. And
Yeah.
what's kind of sad to see the back and forth between is Nassau, is Nassau, it's not the on the island, it's Nassau. And
You know,
I'm trying to figure. I'm sorry.
it's I think because we are a very Nassau centric country, because Nassau is the
Mm,
center. Well, first of all, for your viewers who are global, who don't understand the geography of the Bahamas,
mm,
to give them a little snapshot, we are a chain of islands, yes. Nassau is the city, the island is New Providence. I was raised just outside the city.
mm,
So I'm an island girl, yes,
mm,
but I'm from the city of Nassau.
mm,
I'm not from the outer
mm,
skirts and no. I live out east now, but I'm from the city of Nassau, and so that means that you have the world coming to play in your backyard. They
mm,
come to play in your backyard, so tourism is extremely high on our radar. So too is global banking. So too is all the other financial institutions that are also in Nassau. We are very Nassau focused, very city focused.
mm,
Unfortunately, a lot of urban business occurs in Nassau because
mm,
it's also the heart of government. It is also the heart of the public
mm,
sector. There are many
mm.
other islands in the Bahamas where you are able to get some financial transactions. You can get some
Right.
government business taken care of. But for the most part,
Mm.
when it's time to get your passport stamp, where you go in?
Yeah, you got to come to the capital city.
If you
But
need
my
to have if you need to have major surgery, you go into PM, Princess Margaret Hospital,
That's
PHA.
right. You got to come to the capital.
So
But
I think,
my concern is, sorry to interrupt you. My
yeah,
concern is with the 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 mindset that the, at the end of the day, we're all one, and
mhm,
there's no way that you can say, "Oh, that's not so." I don't care. Let's not worry about it. It's not on the island. It's not happening over here. We don't have to worry about that. It's crazy to have that mindset because
I
for
think it
persons.
happens primarily because there's that old song that says
Hmm.
whenever Nazi people come to town, lock up your front door.
Yeah, but that's
But
crazy because what
it
happens here, what happens in
impacts
Nassau may
everywhere.
at some point impact you. So if you're saying turn your back on the capital city and you think that you're going to be sustainable, yeah, honey, you're wrong.
Yeah,
You still
it's
rely
a
on the
fallacy.
resources
It
from the
is.
capital city.
It is a fallacy. But I think because a lot of the other islands are geographically bigger, even though we have larger population, they are geographically bigger. And I think because of their geographic bigness, their physical size, physical dimensions, and a lot of them feel very disconnected from the city. They feel disconnected from the capital. They feel as if they are sustainable on their own space because many of them have a lot of, I mean, back in the day, they didn't have as many hotels and resorts and restaurants. Many of them are now, in many cases, just as popular as Nassau resorts. There are a lot of tourists who opt to go to Ixom, who opt to go to Harbor Island and Eleuthera and the Abacos because they don't want to deal with the traffic. They don't want the commercial slant on the tourism product. They prefer to have a different look and feel. And I get that. I think for we as a people, there needs to be a stronger level of cohesion. I think there needs to
It
be
has to
the
be.
back in the day we would sing all of we is one.
Absolutely. It
We
has
all
to
had
be.
we all had a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle who was from someplace else. We may have
Absolutely.
been born in Nassau, but we had
Absolutely.
grandparents who were from
Or
someplace else.
parents who came from the out islands. But to have that us versus them mentality is crazy to me. It's crazy. Hello. You
Yeah.
cannot survive without the capital city, regardless of how you feel.
No.
If Nassau falls, everyone falls. And for persons looking on the outside in, they don't see this as Nassau and the islands. This is
Yes.
the Bahamas. It's the Bahamas. I want to capture Miss Pitter's comment, and this goes to the ambassadors. Um, what we spoke about. Sorry, she says
Yes.
it seems that there has been some new thinking about around the relationship with the U.S. and the Caribbean. There are some undercurrent going on, and Miss
There
Pitter's from
is.
Jamaica, and I know that Jamaica has also had a travel advisory issued against them. So I don't know if you want to add your comment about that, Miss Pitter. What are your thoughts? What are your views on an
That
ambassador
is
in your
interesting.
country?
That's interesting to know. I'd love to know what Jamaica is thinking about. I'd love to because, again, I think perhaps we've taken it for granted. Maybe, I don't know. But I know growing up, we never needed a visa to travel to the US.
Hmm.
I mean, if you
Hmm.
remember years ago, you didn't need it. It
Oh
was the
yeah,
thing because we did pre-clearance, right?
absolutely,
And I think and the
absolutely.
rest of the Caribbean had those requirements and we did not. So I think we took it for granted for a period of time. But I am curious to see what's going to happen in the next few months or so as the summer months roll into us and school closes. What's going to happen when kids are no longer in school? How is that going to be impacted when it comes to the police being able to curtail the current the undercurrent? I'm curious to see how
Mhm.
that's going to handle.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Curious.
So absolutely. So I'll wait for Miss Pitter's comment. I think I cut you off. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else. I
No,
okay.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
No, because that part of it, that's crazy to me to think that okay,
I
let's
know.
just it's happening in Nassau. So, I'm on a far flung island, so it doesn't matter because it's only happening in the capital city. So I don't care, honey.
It's always one, right? We all one. Because when you think about it, we are not only are we one country, we're also interconnected. Because my grandparents came from Eleuthera. I have cousins who live in Ixoma. I have family members who live in Grand Bahama and Abaco. And my grandmother came from Inagua. I have an uncle who was born in Cat Island. We are in a very complex country, considering each island has its own unique traits, in some cases its own unique uh, cultural identity, definitely its own slang and its own accent.
Absolutely.
And so, it's just interesting to see how we have gotten to the isms. But I look forward to us getting a stronger level of cohesion, and not just around independence and election day.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we're all interconnected. And like I keep going back to the point, like I share with my friends. I have some friends from Freeport who were saying, throw Nassau away. Well, if you throw Nassau away, what do you think is going to happen to you? Anyway,
And
I
the
I
only
just
part where and the only part where ain't nothing free.
so I want to keep us under I want to keep us I want to keep us on our time, and I want us to go to this final point, and we talked about this a little bit, and we talked about pay disparities, and so I I want that to be our final
Sure.
yeah, our final point, if that's okay with you. So I'll let
Sure.
you take over with that. Yeah.
So we were talking offline about the amazing narrative, the reimagined The Color Purple. I'm wearing hot pink tonight, but I'm still embellishing that whole experience of The Color Purple. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I felt it was somewhat slanted. It was overshone. It was some of the shine and some of the glory of it was taken away by the discussion of pay inequality and the discussion of inequities in payment, and how in many industries, not just in Hollywood, many industries in the US and other places, there is a really strong discussion of pay inequity when it comes to women. So we are in Black History Month, yes, but we are also weeks away from International Women's Month. Coming up, it's
Mhm.
going to be women. Women will be all around the planet wearing our purple and celebrating women. And I think while it's important to celebrate Black History Month, it's important to celebrate women around the world and our global contributions. I think it's important to pay us what we're worth. Don't
Mhm.
clap for me. Pay me.
Mhm.
I don't really need a bouquet. The claps, I'm like, eh. I rather
Run me my money.
yeah, run it to me. Yeah, yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's the overall bottom line of it. I think the conversation is had because I think women are tired of lifting and doing and bending and contorting and pretzeling ourselves into submission. I don't know if you've seen the movie, the Barbie movie.
Hmm.
The Barbie movie has some lines and it's by America Ferrera. And America
Hmm.
Ferrera is a really phenomenal actress. And
Hmm.
she talks about not just pay equity, but where she talks about the importance of how women are everything and still nothing. And you have to do this, but you
Hmm.
can't do this. And you can't be too
Hmm.
skinny, but you must be
Wow.
healthy weight, and you can't be too thin, and you can't be too exuberant. You must be,
Hmm.
bring down your energy, and you can't be too
Hmm.
sad because then something's wrong with you. Then there's all of these, not so much isms, but all
Yeah.
of these boundaries and limits around what women
Hmm.
can and can't and how we have to be. I think
Hmm.
the time has come for us to just recognize that we're enough.
Yeah.
And even if we're not paid what we believe is enough, that we need to recognize that we are enough and celebrate each other. Like I
Mm.
celebrate you, I so appreciate you.
Absolutely.
That we
Absolutely.
celebrate,
Same
that
here.
we find, that we take opportunities to have important discussions, that we take opportunities to
Absolutely.
take our health and our emotional and our physical health into consideration, and that we
Hmm.
not only take care of ourselves, but that we dream out loud and just say, you know what, I'm looking for that next opportunity, and if you hear about it, call me.
Call me. Call
Call
me.
call me, call me, because you never know, right?
Absolutely. Hmm.
You never know. So it
Absolutely.
there's so many conversations to have. I don't think everything is about inequality. I think a lot of
Hmm.
times, one of my favorite sayings is that most often, most women, after you've
Hmm.
done everything that you can do for yourself and your
Hmm.
friends and your brothers and your sisters and everybody, you've studied, you've done the work, and you've, at some point in time,
Hmm.
we all need a fairy godfather to
Oh yeah.
come and just
Hmm.
tap us on the
Yep.
shoulder. A fairy
Absolutely.
godfather. Because
Hmm.
unfortunately, regardless of our industry, regardless of our sector, public or private, regardless if we are in country, out of country, global, regionally, regardless of where we are, there are still some things that men need to do for us. And it's not chivalrous. We don't require you to open doors all the time. It's nice every now and then, but we do require you that when you recognize that we are doing more than enough, we ask you to tap us on the shoulder, say our names in rooms when we are not there, and pay us what we're worth. Pay us.
Thank
Because at the
you.
end of the day, if you don't pay us what we're worth, recognize that you're creating a dynamic where we will at some point not going to deliver all that you want us to
Mhm.
deliver.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. I want to jump to Vivian Pitter. We talked about the travel advisory on Jamaica, and she said
Yes.
they need to rethink all these advisories. Tourism is our chief economic activity for many Caribbean countries, and they will do much damage. Jamaica has not issued any statement yet.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
It is going to be very telling. Um,
Mhm.
it, it speaks to me of, you come to play in our backyard,
Mhm.
and yet when we have social systemic challenges, we can't
Mhm.
call on you for help.
Mhm.
Whenever Prime Minister Brave Davis, whenever Prime Minister Mia Motley, any of our Caribbean leaders, our CARICOM leaders, go to these global conferences and they talk about global climate change, and they talk about migration, and they talk about all of this and the economic state of those countries, and they ask for leniency in paying back the millions and trillions of dollars that we've had to borrow to recover from all of the monster hurricanes, and the money that we've had to use and borrow to just to survive the pandemic, and all of the things that have happened over the past 10, 20, how many ever 10 years. And they consistently say the same thing: we need your support to do X, Y, and Z. We need your support to develop this and to do this and to do that. And there's all these conversations around what we need, what we need, what we need. Seldom do I ever hear there being an offer when someone says, listen, you always saying what you need. Before you even start saying what you need next year or January or February, whenever they're going to go to the next conference, how about some of these superpowers who say, listen, we come to your neck of the woods to play. We're gonna spend $10 on our vacation, but we get 89 billion in our company's contract. How would you give us some money in for industry so we could have some industry, that some meaningful industry that's sustaining, that's going to be able to sustain our economy, that we don't have to be
Mhm.
so reliant on tourism, so that we can do for ourselves. So how about you? How about if you, as James Brown would say, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open the door. Let me get it myself. Open the door.
Absolutely.
Open the door.
Open the door. Open the
Open the
door.
front door. And
Open the
guess what?
door.
Because we island people and all us get one mommy or one daddy on the island, we don't even mind if it ain't no front door. We'll go through the back door with the screen latch because we know how to come over the screen door. Yeah, we
Mhm.
don't. I don't mind if it's a back door. I don't mind. I think
Mhm.
when we go to those conferences, it's wonderful to go ahead and present and say
Mhm.
all these wonderful words. But at the end of the day, I don't really see systemic change coming out of those conferences. All I'm seeing is we're still trying to get their attention and saying, see me here, see me here, see me here. And I'm like, at some point, we have to recognize that we're going to have to start doing for self. We
Mhm.
have to start doing for self. We have to start coming up with our own strategies and not necessarily asking for a seat at the table. Michelle Obama says, stop asking for a seat. Stop asking for a seat at the table. Get your own table and go sit over there. and
Absolutely.
and enjoy your food on your table over there. When they see you having fun at your table, they're gonna be like, which
What's going on over there?
which years ago, Ronnie Butler talked
Mhm.
about in his one of his songs. I can't think of it. I think it was Going Down Burma Road, and he was talking about
Mm.
how back in the day you wanted to eat steak because you saw a steak at the hotels,
Mm.
but the only protein you had was corned beef in the can.
Wow.
But you still, as Langston Hughes said, we ate in the kitchen.
Mhm.
We ate the scraps, so we ate in the kitchen, but we still got strong.
Mhm.
I think sometimes you got to dial it back a little bit and you have to go back to your old school ways and get back into sustainability of your own economy, sustainability of your own sense of self, get back to
Mhm.
our community roots, get back to what
Mm.
it meant to be a strong sense of Bahamian pride. There's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with eating corned beef. We all grew up eating fire engine. That is a Bahamian
Oh
delicacy
yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That
with
is a
corn,
staple.
with corn and white
Yes.
rice, with corn
That's
and white
right.
rice.
That is a
Now,
staple.
if you won't be vegan, then eat the corn and the rice.
That's right. That's right.
But
That's
I
right.
think, it comes back around to saying at some point we have to recognize that there's a disparity in our conversations, and
Mm.
the wealth gap is getting bigger.
Mm.
People are having less opportunities.
Yeah.
People are frustrated. People are
Mhm.
tired.
Mhm.
Are just there. No, at some point you got to get back to a level of, okay, what's going to be the game plan? We've done this and this and this. At some point you get a level set. You got to say, okay, we got to get back to brass tacks. And if
Absolutely.
that means we have to, as they say in the biblical sense, we got to close the door and have a
Yeah.
meeting, have a household meeting. Close the
Yes.
door to the neighbors. Close your door to the, because you can't solve everybody problem till you to
Mm-mm.
get your house in order.
Amen to that.
You have to get your house in order.
Amen to that. And so we're going to cap off with that. And maybe we'll come back again. Maybe we'll come back again and continue in the open session because we covered a
Absolutely.
lot of ground.
We
We covered
did.
a
We
lot
covered
of,
a lot of ground, and sometimes,
yeah,
sometimes that's what's necessary. Without having a necessary agenda, you're able
yeah,
to be organically fluid, and it works. So I
absolutely.
appreciate
And
the
it worked.
opportunity to connect with you and
And
your
thank
community.
you. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you as well.
Absolutely. I see you
And you still
reminding us to
carry,
dream.
huh?
I see you reminding us to continue dreaming behind your head.
Yes,
Thank you for the.
you have to continue to dream. You have to.
Hmm.
Yeah, you have to dream. And so thank you again. You carry our flag everywhere you go, and
I
you
do.
know,
I have to. I have to because if it was not for that, if it wasn't for the 242, where would I be?
absolutely.
Two
And
four
I
two
also
all
want
day.
to thank the 868. I think it's 868 Jamaica. I hope I have the area code right. Thank you, Miss Pitta. I think it's 868. Thank you, Miss Pitta, for joining us tonight as well. I appreciate you. Thank you for the other persons who would have joined us. And is there any additional comments you would like to add before we
I
end?
just want to say thank you once again for the excellent opportunity to go ahead and not only represent the Bahamas, connect with you and your audience, but just have an opportunity to just kind of just chit chat and talk. Because sometimes that's what we need the most, right? Sometimes we don't need hard,
Absolutely.
fast. We have agendas at work. Sometimes as women, we need opportunities that we can just clear the air
Yeah.
and gain some understanding and gain awareness of
Hmm.
common thread, commonality. Sometimes that's all we need.
Yeah.
And so I believe conversations, as Prime Minister Pinling said, it's important for us to contribute to global discussions. It's always important. So I thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you to those. Thank you too. Thank you to those who would have joined us. So this brings us to the end of our session. Thank you for tuning in and joining us in our talk today. I would like to thank our guest, Dr. Michelle Wallace-Rencher, for joining us. We want to remind you if you'd like to advertise with us, let us know. You can also reach out to us through our page. Our contacts are there. We want to grow, so grow with us. To those watching via social media, thank you for listening in. Like our page for future notifications of upcoming talks. Comment under our videos. Let us know your thoughts. We want to hear from you. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Can We Talk? Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and the addresses provided on our page. And remember, let's think, talk, do. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Bye.